I give him a minute.
Sawa.
Apa. Welcome to this press conference by Nairobi Members of Parliament. My name is Anthony Oluoch. I am flanked with the Member of Parliament for Langata, Felix Jalas, Peter Orero Kibra, Tabitha Mutinda, nominated Senator, and the Member of Parliament for Dagoretti North, Esther Beatrice Elachi. My apologies. Ladies and gentlemen, there has been considerable anxiety, and rightly so, on the status of school capitation following a joint appearance of the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury, Honorable John Badi, and CS Education, Migos Ogamba, before the Education Committee of the National Assembly. While this matter is of great concern to Kenyans and parents in particular, who are already otherwise heavily burdened financially amidst tough economic times, we must nevertheless avoid the politicization of matters touching on education and the lives of our children, as has been witnessed in the last few days by politicians seeking to settle scores of whatever nature. As members of Parliament from Nairobi County, who are themselves very key stakeholders in the question of education, we took the occasion to engage the two CSs. We had a meeting, a full house meeting on Monday with the Cabinet Secretary, John Badi. We later had a meeting with the Cabinet Secretary for Education, and the main reason for this meeting was to seek answers on what is the question or what ails this question of education and capitation. So we have the following to say. Article 43 and 53 of the Constitution, read together with various international conventions of which Kenya is a signatory, enjoins government to ensure all children have access to education that is free, relevant, and appropriate. First, no law or policy has changed from our engagement with the two cabinet secretaries. No law has changed the official capitation, on the official capitation. What has changed is the actual amount reaching the school, and this has everything to do with the population growth and budgetary constraints. And we are saying this based on the engagements that we've had with the two cabinet secretaries. Parliament approved the full capitation allocation, and the National Treasury disbursed the funds in the ratio of 50% in term 1, 30% in term 2, and the remaining 20% scheduled for term 3. This is also on record, and we have been able to do that in our engagement. However, when you calculate the approved funds against the real number of students in our schools, especially the fast-growing urban areas like Nairobi, the effective figure per learner ends up being closer to the 16,000, which the Cabinet Secretary had spoken about. This is not because of a cut, not by National Assembly, and certainly not by the National Treasury. It's because our schools are absorbing more students than the budget anticipated, or that our data persons and the persons in charge of collating and reconciling data have been unable to reconcile. The difference between what NEMIS has captured, what is the actual number of students, continues to be a shifting target, something that we as members of Parliament from Nairobi constituency would like to urge that Parliament, in its role of oversight and scrutiny, work together to get for the people of Kenya what is the actual number of students registered under NEMIS, the ones who are students but not registered under NEMIS, so that we are able to plug the gap between the money that we budget and the money that actually gets to school. It is important for Kenyans to understand that this is not a newborn problem. For over the past 7 years, no administration has fully disbursed 22,244, contrary to what has been flying around in the political circles, in terms of capitation per learner. Despite it being the benchmark, year after year, schools have received less than what was promised, and yet principals, teachers, and parents have therefore had to carry this burden. What is different now is that this reality finally was acknowledged. What the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury did was to acknowledge this problem, and we, in our new era of transparency, and while the honesty may feel uncomfortable, it is also necessary. if we are to fix the system and restore public confidence in free education. We note with appreciation that His Excellency the President has recently pronounced the government's commitment to the rights and the constitutional dictates and given the assurance that there will be no going back or rolling back on the gains we have made as a country on education, and in particular to ensure that the policy on free primary education and capitation at 22,000 per student is not only maintained but attained. The Deputy President has, and we note that the Deputy President yesterday also spoke of a similar assurance, which gives us, as members of Parliament for Nairobi, comfort that there is no intention to roll down on this issue of school capitation. The Cabinet Secretary for Treasury has personally given members of Parliament who engaged him, assuring that his ministry remains committed to align with that which the President has said, and the efforts will be made to bridge the funding deficit, including exploring the possibility of additional requests to Parliament during the supplementary budget. A similar assurance has been given by the Cabinet Secretary for Education. It is not lost to us that while Treasury presents its budget estimates based on the fiscal space available, it is up to the National Assembly as the budget-making house to align the budget, reorganize priorities, and ensure that there are non-negotiable sectors such as education where we cannot compromise, and therefore put sufficient resources to this capitation, taking into account the discrepancies that we have already pointed out of the number of students that actually exist vis-a-vis the money that we budget. In this respect, Parliament must take its fair share of blame for having exposed our school and children to by sending money which in their books is supposed to be 22,000, but because of a gap on scrutiny on the actual number of students, we end up getting 16,000 in the school. We must tighten the gaps on scrutiny as members of Parliament and put to task the mandarins at the ministry to ensure that NAMIS actually captures the exact number of students in our schools. We propose that in the period intervening the first supplementary budget, Treasury CS and his education counterpart invokes Article 223 to find some resources to redirect to schools, capitation, and bring the same to the House for ratification at the very earliest opportunity when that matter of the supplementary budget is dismissed. We have the assurance that the 22,000 per child policy has not changed, and it is now upon the National Assembly to make good this constitutional guarantee to our children. Since the rollout of free education, and more particularly since the administration pre the current constitution, that is the Uhuru regime, there has been no full disbursement of capitation to the extent of 22,000. Yet, there has been averment that there is free education that is ongoing. Is there a disconnect? Where is such disconnect? That is the conversation where we need to direct the conversation. It is for this reason that we are inclined to believe that the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury did well to initiate this discussion to enable us find appropriate means to meet this funding gap. He must be commended, not vilified, for having come out candidly on the matter. Nairobi children, many of whom come from less economically endorsed households, have a right to education, and as MPs, having not just listened to and heard the two CSs, will pick up this matter with the relevant committees to ensure that the budget reflects the reality and the needs of our children in full. There has been less money allocated per child than is required. Additionally, the release has been incomplete. The call now is for candid discussion on how best, given the fiscal realities and needs, to address this situation. We have every confidence that the CS for Treasury is the right person to ensure that what has to be achieved in the has not been achieved in the three preceding governments, the government of William Samoei Ruto can accomplish. This is because not only has he managed to stabilize the economy under 1 year, he has also ensured the timely exchequer release to counties, including the arrears that have been carried forward from the previous financial year are completed. This is in respect to CDF. For the first time, we have 100% release of CDF funds, including historical pile-up of debts that have been accrued by the previous administration. In addition to this, the allocation to development may have reduced for obvious reasons, but the percentage by which absorption of development allocation has increased is highly commendable, over 90% from the previous 70% under this cabinet secretary. Before broad-based, the cry was about a runaway economy. That has now stabilized, and now that we are calling for liquidity in the market, given the drop in interest rates, it's clear the administration has taken the right direction and trajectory. Interest rate has been managed, and now the Treasury bill is at a single digit, while the infrastructure bond is at about 12.5%. Nairobi MPs will not allow the team in the executive to drop the ball, because we support the broad-based and will continue to put them on check to ensure that they remain on this trajectory, so that the people of Kenya, and in particular education, may be able to benefit to its fullest. Lastly, we want to thank the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga for the assurances by himself and the party ODM that he leads, that the broad-based arrangement that he has with the government and the establishment of William Samoei Ruto will continue the agenda to unite Kenyans, and is stable and continues to remain the official position of the party. This should put to an end the speculation and uncertainty that has been in the air for the last few weeks among Kenyans, and in particular supporters of the broad-based government. End of statement.
That these numbers are at variance with the capitation that is disbursed to schools. Because when we put this question to the CS, he told us that the NEMIS now, I think, has not been able to capture all the data. And that is why now they are moving to KEMIS, where they are able, I think it is a bigger platform than the NEMIS. And if this happens, we need an assurance that the data for all the school-going children and students in this country will be captured, so that we don't have a gap of those who are not in NEMIS, and we still use them to disburse the capitation. So I think this is the problem that we have a big gap in the Ministry of Education, where the data does not correspond to the capitation that is disbursed to schools. Now, too, about this 16,000, actually, it is about 16,900. That is the actual when we are doing the calculation. And this disbursement sometimes, even the CS admitted that in the first term, firstly disbursed 30%, then 20%, but within the given framework, the limits of first term. So the disbursement should be done promptly with the right figures and the right numbers and the right amounts, so that the schools do not suffer by not receiving all the money that is supposed to be there for capitation. But also one of the reasons that the schools do not get the full capitation is that some of the monies that are meant to be disbursed maybe for infrastructural purposes, some of the monies go to the regional directors, maybe for sporting activities and other activities. So the same money which is supposed to go directly to the school, a bit of it also goes to the regional directors and sub-county directors. Now, this makes the amount that reaches the school not to be exactly 16,900. This is also a question that we have raised with the ministry, so that they must find a way that all the money, the amount that is supposed to reach the student, should be able to reach the student. If they have budgetary constraints, then they also need to put budgetary allocation for these other activities and not for the money that is reaching the students.
Money which they are getting from the parent, especially for the infrastructure schools, including CDF will play a big role for this. Why don't we have money to gather the ministry for infrastructure, which is from the capitation, set aside for infrastructure, which is supposed to go to?
Now, I think basically the CDF is not necessarily for the schools. It is upon the CDF committee to allocate these funds either for bursary or for development. So it depends on the CDF committee of any given constituency. to give whatever allocation, either for infrastructure, development, or bursary, or otherwise. But the ministry also has a mandate to ensure that they also develop infrastructure in schools, because the ministry is the owner of the schools. They must also ensure that these schools have some allocation. The only thing we need to do, maybe, these funds should be put together so that they are disbursed as a unit for one purpose, instead of having many centers of disbursement, which brings a lot of discrepancies. I will also answer a bit of it.
Okay. Yeah, nilitaka kukujibu ndugu yangu kwa sababu huo mswada ambao umeuliza uko katika bunge la Seneti, umeletwa na mmoja wetu ambaye anaitwa Senator Thangwa, ana propose ya kwamba fedha zote zile ziko katika county, zile ziko katika CDF, zile ziko katika national government, pia treasury, na pia katika zile ministry ya education, zote zike katika kikapu kimoja na masomo yote yawe bure. Ni mswada ambao unaendelea. Kwa hivyo tunazidi kuukagua. Ukitoka bunge la Seneti utakuja katika National Assembly, na hapo tutaweza kupata majibu. Kwa hivyo mswada upo na unaendelea.
Lakini kuna wasiwasi kwamba wakati wote ambapo tuna kikao ambacho kinawahusu nyie kuzungumzia swala hili nzima la kuwepo kwa kutumia zile basari kuzipeleka katika shule na vile vile kusema kule nyanjani, kwamba mnajitokeza kwa asilimia kubwa sana, wanasema flow inajaa, yani mnajitetea kwamba wasalie na hizi fedha zisalie katika.
Unajua ndugu yangu, hayo ni maoni yako, kwa sababu wasiwasi wewe ambao wewe wauona ni wako, ni wewe waona huo wasiwasi. Sisi hatuna wasiwasi. Sisi tutakuwa tunafanya kazi yetu, either tukuje wote kwa pamoja ama tukue na zile namba ambazo zinahitajika. La muhimu ni kwamba tumefanya kazi vile ipasavyo. Kwa hivyo usiwe na wasiwasi, tutatekeleza ile inahitajika wakati ambapo utaweza kufika. Wacha nimwache ndugu yangu amalizie. Nimeeleza ni maono yaliyopo sasa. Tunazidi kuyakagua. Yape muda. Ikitoka katika bunge la Seneti yatakuja pande mwingine na wataona ni ipi ambayo inayofaa. Na sio jambo mbaya. Lengo letu, katiba inasema katika kitengo cha 53 ya kwamba kila mwanafunzi, kila mtoto anahitaji masomo bora. Na lengo letu leo hapa kama wabunge wa Nairobi ni kusupport mswada ya kwamba masomo yawe free.
Me, I would have asked that question with a question. That you members of the Fourth Estate, is there any of you from low income community who never got bursary from the constituency? Nani yako na mwanafunzi kutoka Kibra constituency hapa? I wanted to prove that as a member of parliament of Kibra constituency, the CDF of Kibra has given over 65 million bursary to the Kenyan students. And sometimes the parents find it easier to reach the CDF offices than other offices. So this is a debate that is there and will be brought to for public participation for the Kenyans to really debate whether this bursary can still be in the CDF or it can be a collective. We have a collective account for this, either as the ministry or as the national government. So I think we need to hold on to that and wait for this conversation for the Kenyans to decide really whether is it still important for us to have the bursary or it should be put in one place or one basket.
Okay, I will allow Madam Elachi to speak, and remember our presser is on the question of the school capitation, which was a recent issue. So let us not try to change the tone of our discussion to something else. We will have ample time to discuss CDF, whether it should be there, whether we should merge these other things. Today we are on school capitation.
Yes, and I just want to talk on school capitation. I don't want to enter into the matter of bursaries. If you find in your place you don't have bursary, kindly go back to your leaders and talk to them. So don't bulk Kenyans on how each deals with that thing. It's a very interesting topic, but I just want to go back to capitation. The issue of capitation, the thing we are saying, and I know it is a very sensitive thing, is that for us in Nairobi, remember we have children also who are in ABET schools. And so even when government does all this, which I agree they'll have to do in their public schools, but we have to ask ourselves, who is this child, this Kenyan child, who is in Nairobi, who is in an ABET school because maybe is unable to join a public school with many reasons? How do we deal with that? And for us, we are also beneficiaries of the same, of building more classrooms so that we can see our government giving us this capitation. Because I'll tell you, you find in some schools, and that's why we are saying, before we talk about even you taking bursary from NCGDF, can we know how many children we are talking about in Kenya? And each of them must have a number. Each child deserves that number. Because even me in my own school in Kawangware, I have Gatina, they have 3,600 children. The capitation that comes, children with are only 187. And you wonder, so the 2,000? That's why we are telling the ministry, before you tell us anything about the 16, can we just have this capitation first going with data that we have 3 million children? Therefore, when you bring in your budget into Parliament, you are able to say 3 million, give a capitation of 22,000. How much is that is needed to go to schools across the country to make it sure every child is able to get the shares that others are getting, others don't get? That's what we are saying. And the other thing is that even as much as we are talking about it, first we want to say Waziri was well put to give us the honesty of what we have been doing. And I agree with my colleagues, Parliament also must start questioning. And in the next supplementary, can we do it right? I think that should be the best. Because we cannot always just come and we do these debates, but we have no solutions. The solution should be Parliament in a supplementary. Can we put the remaining amounts that were supposed to go to school, period. But also the principals. Because today, there's a principal who has survived in that situation. She has no debt, she's building, she's doing. Kwani yeye ni tofauti na yule mwingine? So, go back to the same reflection of Kenyans. What I ask myself, I should be asking myself, am I doing the right thing also? Or we just ask each other questions. Yet, wewe, ukipata nafasi ya giza hivi, utafanya yale mwenzako tu anafanya mabaya. So, Kenyans is us. It is you in the institution that needs to work in that institution to make it work. That will be my cranial call.
All right, thank you so much. There are copies of the statement, signed copies there, and extra copies. Calendar, you can issue those to. Asanteni sana.
More radio, 88.2 FM. We are in charge. More radio, 88.2 FM. We are in charge. More radio, 88.2 FM. We are in charge. More radio.